light within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. Within ourselves and within those around us, a common challenge at different points is resistance. But too often, resistance is interpreted as being synonymous with a problem or a challenge or adversity, when in fact it may be that the reason we feel resistance is because there's some part of us or some part of them or some part of the situation that needs something more before it moves further ahead. That it's like there's a subconscious part of ourselves or those whom we love that is moving down a trail in the wilderness at night and doesn't want to run too fast because, same thing, different metaphor or different example. When I took driver's ed in high school, one of the safety principles, I guess you'd call it, the teacher presented in this whole collection of methods that he called defensive driving. One of them, he always said, never overdrive your headlights, and which is kind of like on the trail in the wilderness. Don't run faster than the circle of your lamplight. The idea being that whatever appears at the very edge of your headlights, you have to be able to stop in time to avoid hitting it. If your headlight reaches that far and a deer were to suddenly jump into the edge of your headlights, would you be able to stop in time and not hit the deer? If you couldn't, it means you're driving too fast. If the road is one of the many country roads where I grew up, these windy, curvy sorts of roads through the wilderness, and at night there's no street lights or anything, so if you're overdriving your headlights, you might come up on the curve too quickly and slide off the road. In a similar sort of way, I think resistance is this force or dynamic within ourselves, this sometimes maybe part of our subconscious mind that is basically like a guardian angel tapping us on the shoulder and saying, you're not ready for this yet. Slow down, you're not quite ready. You need to get some other things in line first. The other thing that resistance does, though, is not necessarily slow down, as like that road in the country at nighttime with the car's headlights only reaching a certain distance, that the resistance might be that you slow down because the road suddenly curves to the left. And resistance might be like a guardian angel tapping you on the shoulder saying, this is what I was trying to get you to see. And so there's resistance, there's something that holds us back, there's something that makes us not want to rush blindly into it. And sometimes we don't know why. And sometimes knowing why is the reason it's there. Because we might find out more about ourselves when we figure out what it is that's resisting. When something doesn't feel right, it's because something else is right that wants to be discovered. And when we discover that, then suddenly it's like daylight returns and the road opens up and it's like, oh, now you can go forward. As a writer, there have been various times where I was working on a book manuscript and I would write so far and then everything stopped. And some people would say, oh, that's writer's block. You need to do this and this and this and you won't have writer's block anymore. In my case, it wasn't writer's block. It was that the story was reflecting things out of my life. And until I had lived another chapter of my life, I couldn't really figure out how to bring that story to an end. For probably a couple decades now, people have been asking and I've been promising, and I really have been working on it, the story of Sister Who and more of the 30 years of being Sister Who and what it's included and how did it begin and all this detailed information that probably has never been collected in any one place anywhere before. Even with my television shows, I make lots of references, but I don't know that the whole story has ever been told in one place. And so I'm working on that manuscript. I think I'm about 2/3 of the way finished at this point. The interesting thing I'm finding is that it's kind of paralleling my academic studies, in that I started out in Roman Catholic school, I went through junior high and high school, then went through 4 years of college. And then from there, a number of years passed, and then I went back to school and got a master's degree. Actually wound up with 2 master's degrees at this point. But the interesting thing now, as the book is finally kind of coming to a close, I think I've got about 2/3, maybe 3/4 of it written at this point, and I have the sense that it's going to be written to completion within the next year or so. But on an amusing note, because of the way Sister Who is always coming up with a new perspective that is kind of funny, when I finish my doctoral program, which is likely to happen actually within the next few months, that it'll be the first time when someone could legitimately introduce me as Reverend Dr. Sister Who. And because all 3 will apply. But and sometimes people ask me, because of the television show, is Sister Who at all related to Doctor Who? And I said, well, not that I'm aware of, but that's a whole nother discussion. But all of these things, to use a different metaphor, are like peeling off the layers of the onion until you find out what is really inside. What is the core of all this? What is the unique perspective and experience and consciousness from which all of this grows and from which all of this expresses itself? I haven't grandstanded it because I don't want to be obnoxious, I guess, in terms of relating now to her memory, but over the course of 500 and some shows, there are actually 3 shows where I interview the same person. One is a man who identifies himself as a very spiritual atheist. That was recorded way back in the early 90s. As we got into the early 2000s, this same person had now discovered that she was a transgender woman. And so I interviewed her again about all that, the beginning journey and the insecurities and the challenges, and how do you find out whether that's really true or whether it's some psychological construence, something she's psychologically construed to make peace with different parts of her very difficult life experience, actually, which a lot of transgender people have had very difficult life experiences. That sense that a lot of people mention of being trapped in the wrong body, and yet having to go forward in life, and how often do you get to be yourself, and how often do you have to go out in this disguise to blend in so that people won't hurt you, or won't hurt you as much. The interesting thing was, a few years after that, I was able to interview her again as she was completing her transition and was coming out as this very confident, beautiful, outgoing trans woman, and finding herself and finding her life and being able to be herself for the first time ever in the fullest sense of the word, and how joyful and happy she was. And mentioning, I don't know if she mentioned that show, if it was a private conversation, but I was talking with her after she completed her transition, and as she's coming out of that surgery, the first thing she said, absolute first words after coming out of this complete transition to being completely a trans woman, she looked at the friend who had come with her to the hospital, and she said, "I feel free." For the first time in her life, she could say, "I feel free." Her childhood had been grounded in some very conservative religious ideology, so that made things all the more difficult. But then to go from that to being this artistic, very unconventional man, and leaving all that behind to finally start becoming the woman she knew herself to be, and to end as the beautiful, wonderful woman she knew she was. The tragic part of that was that, I think as she put it in an interview, or it wasn't one on the TV show, I don't think, but it was that she had failed to consider the difficulties of being a 52-year-old trans woman, and trying to get restarted, and finding that everywhere she went, the world wasn't willing to embrace her as a trans woman. And so tragically, she ended up committing suicide. But, which to me was a humongous loss, because she was a brilliantly talented artist, an incredibly insightful person. But it basically came down to the point that there was no place in the world for her. And in our last phone conversation, she had said to me, "I am absolutely not prepared to be homeless." That was one bridge that she could not cross. And so she lived until the last of her money was gone, and then said goodbye to the world. And it was actually the maintenance man and I who found the body in her apartment at that point. Because I went to the apartment building and I said, "No, something's wrong. We have to find out now." And that's when the manager wouldn't even go near the apartment because he was so afraid of what he would find, which of course we did. So the maintenance man was the one with the keys that let me in, and that's when we found her. And yet the interesting additional note on that is that because she had been one of the guest performers at my 10th anniversary concert 20 years ago, we had a recording of her performing, being the first person in the world that I allowed to perform this song, because I wrote it for her. And she was the first one to ever perform it. And because that concert was recorded, we used that recording so that she essentially could sing the song at her own memorial service. A real interesting circle. And yet her story is one that unfortunately is so continuing to so many other transgender people, finding themselves trying to move toward congruity and trying to be who they really are and live the lives that they were always meant to live. But, I had to think with all that, if God didn't make a mistake, the journey that she made as a trans woman was such an incredibly daunting and difficult journey that if she was not one of God's mistakes, which I don't think she was, there must have been something so important to communicate to humanity that God would allow someone to go through all of that to get that message across. And so the best thing to me is for all of us to wake up and pay attention, that when we meet or know a trans person who is going through that difficult transition, to know that there is something so important that they have to teach us, that God would allow them to experiencing that extremely difficult journey to get the message across. And for goodness sake, we would do well to pay attention and hear what that lesson is if it is coming at such a high personal cost. It's got to be a very important lesson. So listen and pay attention and have a dialogue and be supportive of the very, very difficult journey this person is going through. But I attempted to capture all that somewhat as I wrote this song, and then sang it for her personally first, which she said actually moved her to tears. And then after that, I just said, "Now you've heard the song, I want you to be the first one to give it to the world." And so that's where she was, the first one to give it to the world at the 10th anniversary concert 20 years ago. Because now, of course, we've gone beyond 30 years for Sister Who. Anyway. For so very long I remember my reflection wasn't me, but a different form and a different norm, something I was supposed to be. Remember touching others with hands that weren't my own. I remember being something that's no longer so unknown. Now my soul knows its face, and my heart finally knows its place. The still a chance that my feet will dance and my voice will sing out my true name. The music of my heart and hands, a holy mystery forever stands. For love unknown within has grown to become the gift of me. I remember being hungry for love without demands. I remember being lonely in a world of shifting sands. I remember to the moment when the sun began to rise. I remember the revelation and tears of joy within my eyes. Now my soul knows its phase, and my heart finally knows its place. There's still a chance that my feet will dance, and my voice will sing out my true name. The music of my heart and hands, a holy mystery forever stands. For love unknown within has grown to become the gift of me. Do you share with me the memory of life that wants to start? Would you share the great discovery of courage of the heart? Would you make the great commitment to be who you really are? Can we finally stand together and fill the night with stars? My soul knows its face, and my heart finally knows its place. There's still a chance that my feet will dance, and my voice will sing out my true name. The music of my heart and hands, a holy mystery forever stands. For love unknown within has grown to become the gift of me. My soul knows its face, and my heart finally knows its place. There's still a chance that my feet will dance, and my voice will sing out my true name. The music of my heart and hands, a holy mystery forever stands. For love unknown within has grown to become the gift of me. For love unknown within has grown to become the gift of me. Dedicated to Lillian Grace Marlowe. I will never forget her. I just wish more people could have known her. It was interesting. She, at one point, decided she was going to go into acting and wanted to have a talk show of all things where she could discuss some of these things, some of the issues she'd been through, some of the things that she deeply understood. And she said she wanted to use one of my songs as the theme song for the show, using the song I Am Who I Am. But she wasn't sure about the second verse. And I said, well, but the second verse is all the bad advice. Surely you've gotten lots of bad advice over the years. You know, be a man, make all the money that you can, never tell a lie. You know, all these different things that are standard pieces of advice, and they're not necessarily bad, I guess, but in reference to that one line, though, be a man, what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a woman? And, you know, in that sense, I try to encourage her to own all of her experience, because she was a trans woman. She wasn't a genetic girl, as one of my trans friends put it. She was a trans woman. And there are experiences that a trans woman has that no other woman will ever have. And there are experiences that a genetic woman has that a trans woman won't have. But the point is that they each have something deeply insightful and valuable to bring to the table. And if they, at any point, try to pretend that there's something other than what they are, if they don't own and somehow embrace and integrate all of that experience, and like Lily, to work through it and work through it and work through it until she got to a place where she could be this happy, joyful, fulfilled person, where she had found ways to heal the wounds and to tie up the loose ends and to recognize those things as pertaining to that time and not extending into the present, and these things as being the present, and yet the present had challenges too. And there were a lot of different alternatives I think she could have tried, but I don't know that she had the strength to try them after everything that she'd already been through. And so she did everything she could and gave everything she could. And when there was nothing left to give, she had to respectfully and politely bow out and just say, I'm done. I can't do anymore. But as much as she did do, it was so incredible and so encompassing, and still has so much to teach those of us who are left behind for now. Left behind at that point, but you know, at some point, each of us is going to leave others behind also. We're not immortal. We're here to do as much good as we can, to learn as much as we can, to love as much as we can, for as long as we can, and then we're done. And in some ways, I talk about 20 or 30 years, and I'm getting up in age too, I guess, but I hope that doesn't stop anyone from hearing what I have to say. I hope I don't run into too much ageism, because I still feel like, I don't know, maybe a young 30-year-old in my mind or something. And I'm still climbing mountains that reach above 14,000 feet, and still doing all these things that I don't think you're supposed to do at my age, but I want to do them and I can, so I keep doing them. I guess whatever age I become, I'm going to be redefining what it means to be that. And if I run into resistance, I'm going to invite that resistance to be my teacher and figure out what part of me I still haven't discovered and that I need to discover in order to move that much further down the path. And if there's a resistance some area, maybe it's something tapping me on the shoulder saying, look over here, there's something you haven't discovered yet. And there's a reason why you're not ready for it yet. And as soon as you know the reason, you'll be ready. But to rush into something blindly will take something that could have been wonderful and turn it into a tragic circumstance instead. And so, as Sister Hu, I encourage everyone, listen to the resistance and listen to the inspiration and listen to the intuition. And listen to others also, but don't let others' definition of you be the limit of all you can be. To end on just a brief comment, there was a peculiar social norm in the area where I grew up that children were not supposed to be smarter than their parents. And so there are a lot of things that I couldn't tell my parents that I learned over time. And the problem, and that same sort of pattern, though, translates into colleges and universities that I found. There were a lot of professors who assumed the students were not supposed to be smarter than the professor. Well, as an autistic, as some people said, I'm an autistic savant. In certain areas, my IQ is 30% above normal. Because of that, I wasn't trying to embarrass them, but I would ask things and bring up things. And in theological school, I was talking circles around my professors without trying to. And I wasn't trying to embarrass them. I just had insights that were coming to me and so forth. But the problem with all of that is that if we don't allow anyone, anything, however young or old or whatever source, to teach us, we will never know anything more than is already known. And the students in every class can rise to levels higher than the teacher. And it's better if the teacher allows that and encourages it instead of trying to tell them that you can't know more than I do, because then humanity will never get any smarter. The students have to be able to rise above the teacher. In any case, thank you very much for joining me for the last half hour. I hope that what I've shared has been helpful. And now may you be blessed with love and peace in the pursuit of your own dreams and in all your dealings with the diversity of humanity around you. Amen. My hand to yours and your heart to mine can make every dream come true. Hands holding hands can hold the world. Hearts holding hearts can live anew. My hand to yours and your heart to mine can make every dream come true. Hands holding hands can hold the world. Hearts holding hearts can live anew. My hand to yours and your heart to mine can make every dream come true.